What we're really hoping to do with AI is just to use that to introspect on that and say, hey, can you tell me the top 3 customer problems based on everything you know in the last 3 months with regards to this particular part of the journey? I think AI will be really powerful to enable our people to interact with the data that we've got in a way that would just be impossible today.
Hello, I'm Anthony Maggio, and I'm the head of product management at Airtable. And today I'm so excited to welcome Stewart Ehoff, head of growth platforms and product operations at RS Group. Welcome, Stewart, to Builders and Breakthroughs.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on here. It's great to be here.
Awesome. Well, Stewart, I'm so excited to have you. RS Group has such an interesting history. You shared it's an 85-year-old company. It started in a London garage in 1937. Tell us a little bit about the company today and the headlines in terms of how you describe where you're at now.
Yeah, so as you say, a great sort of origin story, sort of 1937 in a garage in London to now FTSE 250 titan of industry within B2B. So RS Group are an industrial supplier of product, services, and solutions. We're about 3 billion a year as a business. About 60% of that transacts through digital channels. So our e-commerce offering and our product offering is a core part of the success of our business.
Awesome. And you shared that so many of your customers have so many great memories and stories about RS Group. Tell us a little bit more about who your customers are and what the brand represents.
Yeah, so our customers can really range across a ton of different industry verticals like discrete manufacturing or process manufacturing. Given that RS is like an 85-year-old company, you very often find when you're talking to customers that you have people with personal stories around the business, like, oh, my dad was an engineer and he always had an RS catalog kind of in his garage when he was tinkering with things or doing things with work. So often when we talk to customers, we actually find when we're doing kind of research interviews with customers, it can be really unhelpful sometimes because people are like, oh my God, I love the brand. I love RS, got a huge amount of kind of emotional connection to it. And it's like, okay, can you tell us what we could do better to improve your experience? It's like, absolutely nothing. I just love you. You guys are amazing and fantastic. Keep doing what you're doing. So that can be unhelpful at times. But yeah, from a catalog business to an online e-commerce business, it's been quite the transformation over the sort of 30 years as we've kind of gone through the internet era and into the modern e-commerce era.
So RS Group was an early mover into web and e-commerce. What did that journey look like, building out a product function within an 85-year-old company?
Yeah, so I think we established the first website around about the early 2000s. So interestingly, there's a chap who still works at RS who was part of that initial program to build the first website. And ahead of this, I actually asked him, I was like, how did that actually come about? Because you just kind of think, a very sort of manual office, there's paper everywhere. How do you go from that to kind of building a first website, from a catalog business? And the story, as it goes, as I'm told, was one day on the office floor, the manager kind of dropped in and said, hey, has anyone ever heard of this internet thing that's kind of blowing up a little bit at the moment? Who knows how to do stuff with that? And he sheepishly put his hand up and said, yeah, I know a few things about it. And that was kind of the origin story of the first website. So RS, very quick to market. And then, in terms of the continuation of that capability, it's evolved over the years to product teams as we know them today. Originally, the website was just kind of like a marketing tool, and then the catalog and the e-commerce piece was moved in where we were transacting orders. And today we have 10 plus product teams across the organization supporting the global operations of our regions across the US, EMEA, and Asia Pacific.
Incredible. And what, if you can share, what percentage of the business comes through the website today?
Yeah, so surprisingly, for a traditional business in B2B, which normally sees a lot more kind of human interaction and less kind of technology adoption, RS actually supports over 60% digital share of revenue, which is amazing. but there's still so much more opportunity for us to serve our customers across their needs in ever increasing mature digital ways.
Yeah, what an incredible transformation. I'd love to shift gears and hear a little bit more about your journey. You joined the company a little over 6 years ago as a software engineer. Tell me about your history and your path into becoming the head of experimentation.
Yeah, it's quite a question, and it's really been quite a journey. So when I first joined the company, I was just joining as hey, this is a software engineering gig at a FTSE 250 company. This seems pretty cool, right? And little did I know that the team that I was joining was the then known as the optimization team. And that team was a kind of a central team that was sort of building A/B tests using Adobe Test and Target at the time, right? And so it was really interesting kind of landing into role and learning all about A/B testing, learning all about experimentation. I didn't just get kind of the software engineering skills around building and deploying there, but I also learned a ton of stuff around analytics and hypotheses and solving customer problems. And so it was a really kind of expansive moment for me in my career where normally in a software engineering role, you're kind of focused on just delivering engineering tickets, right? Whereas in this role, I was really focused on what are the customer problems, what hypotheses do we have, and what are we trying to achieve as a business outcome through software delivery.
And how did you go from software engineer into this role driving experimentation and growth across the business?
So after a certain point in time, kind of, get your feet under the desk and kind of figure out the role and figure out what's going on. After a certain point in time, I sort of realized that of all of the testing that we were doing, it only really amounted to around 5% of the things that we were actually shipping to our customer experience, right? So, 95% of things were just kind of very much feature factory, taking business requirements or sometimes just on a whim of a customer, kind of, hey, we really think this thing would be important. We're just kind of shipping stuff into production. We weren't really measuring stuff, and we definitely weren't testing stuff, at least not en masse. And so I kind of said, well, hang on, it doesn't really make much sense for us to kind of say 5% of things we sort of do test and validate that we then, feed into the product roadmap. And then 95% of things we just kind of cross our fingers and pray and hope for the best, right? Interestingly enough, when we were also shipping tests and we were finding winning treatments, we then tried to feed that back into the product backlog. And we found it very difficult to kind of get those things woven into the existing backlog because there was such a kind of long tail on the commitment, right? Oh, we're busy for the next 3 months shipping all of these things that we've committed to our stakeholders. So the journey, to summarize it, has really been in embedding experimentation into the product teams. So rather than having it as a separate methodology that was run within the small team that I was a part of, kind of building tests and shipping tests, we embedded the technology, the methodology, and the approach into the product teams. We established a center of excellence that enabled our product teams to kind of work within a framework to allow them to run high quality tests and to achieve their product outcomes. And through that journey, I've then kind of elevated to kind of getting out of building code every day and sort of leading the transformation more broadly across the business in how we adopt that across all of our product teams and as a methodology that we adopt globally across the business.
That sounds like a huge cultural shift. You described the early state kind of feature factory, everybody building and shipping new features as quickly as they could. What did the journey look like, and what was the kind of cultural change that was required to go from that mode of operating to now experimenting with every new feature or product that you're launching?
So it's definitely hard yards, and I know that there may be some experimenters in a position to where we were sort of 3 or 4 years ago who might be saying, I feel like I'm stuck there right now. Like, how do you break through that cultural shift? How do you move forward? So there is a way. I think I'm living, breathing proof that there is a way. But really the advice or the recommendation that I give is sort of how do you break through that kind of cultural transformation is really just starting small and building sort of a small nucleus of success where, we didn't just go out across to all product teams from day one and say, right, now everything that you do has to be validated by an experiment, right? That would probably be quite difficult. Although I have heard of instances where chief product officers join the company and say, yeah, that's what we're doing. So that can also work. But from my point of view, starting small and just with one individual team who kind of is curious and wants to maybe give this thing a try, through that, one team, we then had sort of a bit of a Trojan horse that we could then move through the other teams to say, hey, this team, they're testing things and they actually have really clear cause and effect, not just correlation between the things that they ship and the impact they have on their customers and ultimately the metrics they're driving for the business. Do you want some of that? Do you want a slice of that? And sure enough, the other teams are like, yeah, that sounds great. So hard yards to get the first team off the ground. But then once you've done that, you kind of create this wave and this momentum. And there's also, leadership participation that's really important there in terms of finding, an evangelist kind of in your senior leader space to kind of sponsor the program and keep things on track.
Yeah, awesome. So fast forward to today, tell us a little bit more about what does the product operating rhythm and experimentation rhythm look like within RS Group now?
Yeah, so we've got a pretty comprehensive setup in terms of our product operations process, our experimentation process. We've built an Airtable base that effectively acts as sort of the backbone of that program. So we have product teams that sort of live in our Airtable base, moving experiments, hypotheses, ideas, designs, engineering tickets through that ecosystem. That ecosystem is connected to other tools that are critical to the product development program like Jira or Figma, etc. Ultimately, we've ended up on a really cohesive ecosystem that enables our product teams to just come up with ideas based on really credible customer data and customer research and move those all the way through to production and into a measurable test without any impediments.
And what was the story behind building out that system? How did you discover Airtable? How did you decide to build out this experiment operating system and the research tools that you've now put in place?
So I guess winding back to when we were embedding experimentation within our product teams initially, and we'd sort of, kind of championed with one team and we're starting to move to a second team, we were sort of doing things in a pretty scrappy way, right? So we didn't have any kind of well-established end-to-end process. Our documentation was a bit of a mess. So we had Excel spreadsheets, we had a little bit of a Jira board, we had a bunch of stuff sitting in PowerPoint presentations and in emails. And at the time, I was, the head figure of the program. I was running kind of the transformation in the initiative. And I was getting questions from senior leaders like, well, hey, can you tell me how many experiments we've run? And can you tell me how much value we've generated through those experiments? And I was like, oh my God, I actually can't, right? So I was like looking in my spreadsheet and I was looking at emails and I had to do so much manual work to try and rationalize the program and kind of report on the program, right? So that was a really big problem. And it was starting to run away from us because we were having great traction with the teams. So we sort of said to ourselves, well, there's got to be a better way to do this. And, we reached out to lots of different other companies who are running experimentation programs and agencies and, various different experts to kind of get a view. And there was tons of different options that we could have taken. But in the end, the one that we really landed on that we loved was just trying to build something with Airtable, right? And we had a bit of expertise, external to the business that we tapped into to give us some ideas. And we did that through an agency. It was weird because a few years ago, I'd sort of never heard of Airtable. And as soon as I had this first conversation with someone about, well, hey, have you thought about Airtable? Suddenly I just saw it everywhere, right? It's kind of like the yellow car type thing. You never see a yellow car. And then as soon as you're looking for it, it's everywhere, right? So that was kind of the backing story.
Yeah, awesome. You had shared that there was some cultural changes, some practices that you had to put in place to really get the teams to adopt Airtable and to make it such a central tool for running your product operations. Tell us a little bit about what did that look like and how did you get the other teams on board to this centralized system?
Yeah, so I think the first thing to say is that the first version of this backbone, this sort of experiment operating system that we built, we actually threw it away. And I think it was because we got really excited about getting into kind of building something that would just get us out of the spreadsheets and get us out of PowerPoint presentations and emails, that we neglected to take a bit of a step back and think about this as a product within its own right. And now we very much consider, what we've built within Airtable as an in-house product that we build and maintain and own. So the first step was build something, kind of go through that Dunning-Kruger moment of, oh, wow, we really didn't know what we didn't know, scrap it, and then kind of build it again. And the second time that we built it, we kind of built it alongside some of the teams that we were experimenting with, right? So it's kind of like, hey, well, what are your needs and what do you need this to do and how does it best work for you? And we sort of went through that sort of test and learn process within our own product to do experimentation. It was really, really cool, right? One of the key hurdles we had to get past was that the teams at first felt like the product teams, they felt as if it was sort of extra work for them to document their workflow within the experiment operating system in Airtable. And actually, what we had to convince them is that actually it's not extra work, it is just the work, and it's just a different type of work. But we were able to sort of make that a lot more fluid for the teams by using some of the automations and some of the integrations into other tools that the teams know and love. So one real example of kind of removing pain for our product teams was when we built the automation from Airtable into Jira. So before, someone was having to kind of manually copy the contents of sort of the experiment brief, the acceptance criteria, the requirements, copy it into a Jira ticket, and those two things didn't talk to each other. Whereas now we've got kind of a two-way system where the information is automatically pushed into the respective product team's engineering backlog, and when that ticket is finished in Jira, it then pushes a notification back into Airtable to then update the status of the experiment. So we really built Airtable into the workflow of the teams, and Airtable is really just that backbone that enables us to operate effectively.
Yeah, that's such a great way of approaching the problem, really bringing those product practices into your own development of, not only your product, but your internal tools.
That's right.
How much feedback and iteration do you continue to put into those solutions that you have built out around experimentation and research?
I think the answer is all the time. So we're constantly developing new automations, new interfaces, refining some of the underlying data that exists within our Airtable base. We're constantly asking our stakeholders, hey, what works for you? And, how could we be assisting you better in running experiments and running your product process? And of course, Airtable constantly, as you know, leading the products for Airtable, you're constantly adding new features that then allow us to sort of think about, well, hey, we could also now do this, or now we can also connect into this thing, or try out this new way of working. So we have a continuous improvement sort of fortnightly session where we take a step back. We don't talk about the work itself, but we talk about the experiment operating system, some of the work that we've got happening around that. What do we prioritize and what do we move forward? So actually, in some respects, what we've built in Airtable has its own sort of mini product backlog that we're constantly doing research on, we're constantly iterating on. It's a living, breathing, and evolving system.
Yeah, that's awesome, and it speaks to really how you've continued to allow the tool to evolve around the changing shape of your organization and changing processes. You shared that you've expanded beyond just the experiment operating system now into research and driving some new practices around the way that you do research within RS Group. Can you tell me a little bit more about what that looks like and what are the research processes that you're focused on tracking and putting into place today?
Yeah, absolutely. So as we started to scale the experimentation program, and that was becoming really successful in kind of rolling out across more teams, onboarding teams to the experiment operating system, one thing that we weren't as happy with were sort of the results of some of those tests, right? So we realized that while teams were doing well on their adoption journey and sort of the process we put in place was helping them to run experiments at a good velocity, actually the quality of those experiments in terms of the customer problem that we're trying to solve for, the solidity of the hypothesis and sort of the breadth of research and information those product teams had available to make good decisions about what they prioritized wasn't very good. Mm-hmm. So we spent a good amount of time with our research team figuring out kind of their processes and how they were working, right? And I guess similar, it was almost a bit of a deja vu moment because similar to the problems that I was having with Excel sheets and PowerPoints and emails, when I sat down with the research team and I sort of asked them what their primary sort of collateral was that they were dealing with, generally it was PowerPoint presentations, right?
Yeah.
I distinctly remember opening one of our user experience research packs to see 100+ slides, right? And the research team was sort of feeling really out by themselves, right? Because they were doing tons of research, but they couldn't necessarily see the connection from that research to then the product backlogs that was then driving the outcomes for the business. So we went through the same process with the research team. We said, hey, we think we can help you with this problem. Let's create an interconnected ecosystem that allows you to feed your research directly into kind of a pool that our product teams will be looking at to prioritize their experiments. And so we went on this journey to kind of take all of our research insights from PowerPoint and put them into data that lived within Airtable. And while that was a tough process to begin with, we just started with sort of one PowerPoint presentation. Today, we have thousands of insights in an Airtable repository from all kinds of different data sources that our product teams use to decide, okay, well, where are our top customer problems, and what should we be prioritizing as a product outcome this quarter to focus on? And that's now based entirely on research and rather than what it was previously based on, which was largely guesswork.
That's a great story, and awesome that you've centralized so much of that. Those insights. Have you seen it actually change anything around the way that the product teams are operating or the way that they're leveraging research as part of the development process?
Absolutely. I think the biggest change that we've seen is that research is considered as a primary activity rather than as an activity that happens sort of at the back end of the process, right? So what I mean by that is that product teams are taking a research first approach. So rather than just jumping into building stuff, we're instead consulting with our research team to sort of say, well, what do we know and what information do we have to hand? What do we not know, which should then inform further research studies that we might want to run with our customers. And then let's use that to define and prioritize what ultimately gets pushed into the product backlog and what we then develop and test. For the research team specifically, though, there's so much more agency. They feel really involved in the end-to-end process, and they have a direct connection to the customer outcomes. Because when we ship a test that turns out to be a winning treatment for our customers and we deploy that into production, because of the way that we've built the data structures within Airtable, we can actually see from that winning test, we can trace it all the way back to the different types of research that informed the idea and the teams that contributed to that research, even down to the individual researcher who conducted that study that then fed that in to the product team. So there's so much more agency, so much more collaboration, and people can really see the value of their work.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it must feel great for your researchers and your research team to be able to trace back the impact of the research that they're doing and how it's making its way into the product.
For sure. It also helps us to demonstrate the return on investment of a research program, right? Whereas sometimes the research can be seen as a little bit of a cost center, or some businesses might struggle to say, well, what is the actual value of funding this research team or funding an expansion to a research team? We can be really clear to say, well, the research has led to these types of outcomes for our business.
Yeah, that's awesome. How do you think about the impact of the operations that you've put into place around experimentation and around research? And obviously, all of this is in service of growing the business, growing revenue of the e-commerce offerings. But at a high level, kind of how do you think about the impact that you've seen through some of these operational changes?
So I think for me, we as a company feel a lot more organized and front-footed from a product development perspective. So, before, where we sort of had a bit of a feature factory and there was an element of perhaps we were being just a little bit, kind of having the blinkers on and just kind of running forward and shipping as many things as possible. I actually think part of the operational workflows we've put in place have brought a level of discipline to the company that's also alongside a cultural shift helped us to get to superior outcomes for the business. Historically, I remember one of our heads of product sort of telling me 2 or 3 years ago that when they were providing sort of end of year financial updates for their area, it was very difficult to sort of say, here is the exact value we've returned to the business, and here's the things that we've learned, and here's what we're going to focus on sort of, broadly next year as a result. Whereas as we started to embed experimentation in the operations, we had a really clear kind of run of road for our teams to operate through. And we also had all of the data and the metrics for the program to back it that was self-serve. So our head of product could instead say, well, my team have shipped this many tests, and we've done these many research studies, and we've delivered this much tangible return on investment for the business. And we've learned all these different things that are also, nobody was thinking about these things internally into the business. These are learnings that have emerged through that process that we've then captured back in that operational system. So I think discipline is the word that I would use to sort of describe how we are today versus where we were before. I guess we were shooting from the hip, whereas now we're very rooted in our customer needs and what they're telling us.
Yeah. Yeah. And it sounds like you had shared that some of that discipline has actually made its way even outside of just the product organization. You shared that your CEO recently asked you for a login to the experimentation system you've built. So what prompted that, and what was the story behind some of those maybe the metrics or insights that you're capturing that executives are now gravitating towards?
Yeah, so over the years, we've slowly increased the kind of the engagement and the comms that we put out to the business. So a big part of building the cultural transformation that's required to do this type of work is change management and comms, right? So we've, in sort of recent years, over-indexed on change management and comms, and so we've built a couple of different methods within the business in which we drive that engagement. So the first is our monthly newsletter, where we update on all the sort of movement in the experimentation space. What tests we've got running, what tests have been concluded, what learnings the teams have taken. We do a deep dive on a couple of tests. And so that newsletter goes out to pretty much the entire company, and we're seeing ever increasing kind of discussion and engagement around that. And it can often act as a catalyst for people to say, oh, hey, actually, I didn't know that we were doing that. So let me go engage with that team so I can learn more about it. The second thing that we've embedded is a quarterly engagement session. So we run a quarterly forum when we invite as many people from the company to attend as possible. And we talk about the foundations of experimentation and product, right? We tell people who are, maybe from more of a sales background or a marketing background or otherwise, what is the importance of good and rigorous experimentation, and how do we actually do that? And what are the processes and systems we have in play to make that work? And how can you get involved, right? The beauty of what we've built with the experiment operating system is anyone can see it, even our CEO, right? So, again, that backbone that we've built has acted as that sort of, jumping off point to then help us to build some of these, change management assets and communication assets to engage with the business.
Yeah, that's awesome. Great to see. I love all the ideas about kind of pushing out the newsletters and making the work happening within products so accessible and engaging to the rest of the company.
That's right.
Yeah. So shifting gears a little bit, I think, every product leader that I have spoken to recently is starting to think about how to incorporate AI into their product development process. Tell me a little bit about where you are in terms of AI adoption and how you're thinking about opportunities to bring AI into some of the processes within your org.
Yeah, it's definitely a question that you can't escape these days, right? It's on everyone's minds. So for me, I think AI has two really powerful applications for us. I think the first is in empowering our teams who are doing a lot of manual data entry and kind of transfer of research data, particularly into our Airtable base, really relieving some of the pressure there. So actually enabling that to be a bit more of an automated process that can just have a bit of a human level of validation rather than humans kind of doing the laborious work of copy and pasting or doing manual data entry. The second piece, which I think is arguably more exciting, is using AI and feeding AI sort of the enormous bank of knowledge that we've built over time about our customers and what works for them and what doesn't. So as we've continued to build our research into this operating system, it's become ever more cumbersome to actually use that research in a meaningful way, right? If you've got thousands, if not tens of thousands of different individual insights, how do you actually objectively tease out the ones that are most important or most relevant to your particular question? And there's often a lot of human bias that can get introduced into that process as well. So what we're really hoping to do with AI is just to use that to introspect on that and say, hey, can you tell me the top 3 customer problems based on everything you know in the last 3 months with regards to this particular part of the journey? I think AI will be really powerful to enable our people to interact with the data that we've got in a way that would just be impossible today.
Yeah, but it sounds like both the bias and the scale, and making it even more accessible and relevant, all of that knowledge that you've accumulated in this research repository to all of your practitioners.
100%. Yeah. And it's just going to be so powerful. It will save us so much time. It will bring some objectivity to it. But also, I think it's really empowering for people who sit outside of the process as well to sort of take an objective view of, actually, these are the top customer problems, right? Because sometimes even, we're a 10,000 strong employee organization. Certainly not the biggest by any stretch of the imagination, but across 10,000 people, it can often be difficult to align on what are the top priorities and where should we be focusing our energy and efforts on. I think bringing a layer of AI to that, it can be a little bit more objective than maybe us humans might be, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely makes it much more feasible and possible to cut through all the noise and surface some of those thematic areas objectively.
100%.
Great. So I'd love to wrap up with just a few quick fire questions. And I'll shoot them off and give you a few minutes to respond to each one. So first question, what's a product or tool that you've recently discovered that you love?
So I wouldn't say it's a recent discovery, but it's something that I've been recently getting into. So I've been aware of it for a while, but only just started to see the potential. It's sort of the operational system that we've been building. So I'm talking about Gong, which is sort of the sales ops kind of platform that helps to record and transcribe calls. I'm sure we've all seen it. You're on a call with a salesperson and they've got an AI helper with them. But Gong is really impressing me, and I think it would be really powerful in acting as another vector of research for us, right? So we don't currently capture sentiment from sales calls. And as a business, I think we make about 70,000 customer service calls alone, and then further beyond that, a huge amount of sales calls as well from a business development perspective. So having all of that richness of information feeding into our kind of institutional knowledge is getting me really excited, and I think that could be really powerful. So it's got to be Gong for me.
Yeah, it's a great tool. We use it internally, and we actually just launched a Gong integration as well. So great timing as you start thinking about bringing that into your process.
Fantastic. Even better.
Yeah. Okay, second one. If you weren't in your current industry or role, what do you think you'd be building instead?
It's probably going to be a bit of a left field answer, but I'd probably be building something to do with music, drums, electronics, something like that. So my background, it's a little known fact. I'm actually a grade 8 classically trained drummer. And before I got into software engineering, I spent my time at university doing an audio engineering degree where I spent a lot of time with doing mixing and mastering and miking up drum kits and recording music and producing music. It's still a bit of a passion for me and a small hobby for me, but I think if I wasn't building software and operations and systems, I think I'd be building electronics and, tinkering around with software in that regard.
Yeah, awesome hobby. Sounds like maybe a future second career ahead of you in that space.
Possibly. I'd love to find a way to bridge the two. It's not always possible, but who knows?
Yeah. Great. And what's something you've read in the last year that shifted your perspective? Read or listened to, we'll say.
So one of the biggest influences for me in the last year has been Marty Kagan from the Silicon Valley Product Group. And I've been really inspired by his most recent book, Transformed, which talks about the product operating model. And it's particularly poignant for us, in the journey that we're on at RS Group in continuing to evolve our operating model and how we think and how we operate. And so that book has been particularly transformational for me in giving me some real world stories in how companies with as much legacy and age as ours are kind of going through that transformation journey. What are some of the pitfalls you might fall into, and then what are some of the things that you can do to help to drive success through that transformation? So that's been really inspiring. I've really enjoyed kind of getting into all of that content as well. So yeah, product operating models swimming around in my brain.
Absolutely. Marty Kagan is a legend in the field. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Stewart, for joining us today and for sharing your story. It was wonderful to have you on the podcast.
Brilliant. It's been really fun. So thank you so much for your time. Thanks Airtable for having me on. It's been really awesome to do this because I think for a while I've always wondered whether Airtable just quite realized how loved they are, at least in the experimentation community. I know you have so many product evangelists across so many different verticals and use cases, but in experimentation, I think the love for Airtable is incredibly strong. So it's been awesome after building with the product for many years to do this, to share our story, and to get some light shone on the experimentation industry as well.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much and great to have you.
Thanks very much.